Most people think this issue is settled. Slavery is condemned, history is acknowledged, and the world has moved on. But when countries were forced to actually take a position at the United Nations, the reality looked very different. The story we're hearing is straightforward. A UN resolution called for recognizing the long-term impact of slavery and opening the door to reparations. Not forcing payments, not assigning immediate penalties, just acknowledging what happened and starting a conversation about responsibility. That sounds like something most countries would support. But here's the issue. That's where things start to break. When the vote happened, 3 countries voted against it outright: the United States, Israel, and Argentina. Most of Western Europe didn't support it either. They abstained. Meanwhile, countries like China, Russia, Ghana, and much of the global south voted in favor. Even countries that present themselves as neutral or humanitarian, like Sweden and Switzerland, didn't back it. That contrast is hard to ignore. If you haven't done so, go ahead and subscribe to Progressive Wave. Please support the channel by liking the video. We need your support to keep bringing you news like this. Now, let's walk through this, step by step. First, this resolution is not legally binding. It doesn't force any country to pay reparations. What it does is signal where global opinion is moving, and that matters more than it sounds. Then, look at the numbers. Over 120 countries supported it. That's roughly 2/3 of the world. This isn't a fringe position anymore. It's becoming the majority view. Now here's the important part. The resistance isn't really about whether slavery was wrong. That's already accepted. The real issue is whether that past creates responsibility today. And this is where things get uncomfortable. Because slavery wasn't just a moral failure, it was also a business model. It generated massive profits. European powers like Portugal, Spain, the UK, France, and the Netherlands built wealth directly from it. At one point, enslaved people were bought for small amounts and sold for many times more. It was a system designed for profit. Now watch what happens next. When slavery was abolished, the people who were compensated were not the enslaved. They were the slave owners. In the UK alone, the equivalent of around 20 billion euros was paid to owners for their loss. So when you put that together, you get a clear contradiction. Compensation existed, but it went in the opposite direction. And here's where it gets even more revealing. Take Haiti. It successfully freed itself from French rule, the first major slave revolt to do so. But instead of being supported, Haiti was forced to pay France massive sums just to avoid being attacked again. That debt followed Haiti for generations. So the idea that this is just history doesn't really hold up. Now here's the part most people miss. Even today, many of the same relationships still exist, just in a different form. African countries, for example, are still largely treated as sources of raw materials rather than equal partners. Resources flow out. Value stays elsewhere. Despite years of promises from European leaders to build equal partnerships, the structure hasn't really changed. And that leads to a bigger point. This vote isn't just about the past, it's about how the world is organized right now. Countries in the Caribbean, through groups like CARICOM, have already proposed what reparations could look like. Not individual payments, but things like debt relief, investment in health and education. So the argument that we don't know how to do it doesn't really hold either. And here's where it gets interesting. This vote also shows a shift in global power. Smaller countries are starting to coordinate. Countries like Ghana are stepping forward and pushing these issues onto the global stage. The UN General Assembly, where every country gets a vote, is becoming a place where that majority can be seen clearly, even if the decisions aren't binding. So when you connect all of this, one conclusion stands out. This isn't just a debate about history, it's a signal that a large part of the world no longer accepts the current balance of power and is starting to push back. This matters because it affects what comes next. As new partnerships form, whether with China, Russia, or regional alliances, countries that once depended on the West now have options. That changes the leverage. And inside Western countries, there's another layer. More people are starting to question where money is going, toward military spending and global dominance, while basic needs at home are under pressure. That gap between elites and ordinary people is growing. So the real question is, what happens when the majority of the world keeps pushing for change, and even people inside powerful countries start asking the same questions? That pressure doesn't just disappear, it builds over time. If this helped you see it more clearly, like the video, and subscribe to Progressive Wave for more breakdowns like this.